We have arrived at the final weekend of the 2024-25 OHL regular season, and there is still so many playoff positions to figure out as we go into these last couple of games for most teams. And it's a great race in both the West and Eastern conferences. So I just wanted to break down where we stand as we go into these final few games. What's at stake? Who could maybe change positions? And what playoff matchups do we already know about at this point? So let's start things off in the Eastern Conference because there's a huge game set to take place tonight in Kingston between the Frontenacs and the Brantford Bulldogs. Tonight's game could basically decide who will finish first in the Eastern Conference standings. The Bulldogs ended up losing to Brampton on Wednesday night, and then Kingston, with their win over Peterborough, has put the gap to just 1 point between the Bulldogs and the Frontenacs at the top of the East Division. And the Oshawa Generals, they've kind of slipped of late. They're 5-4-1 over their last 10 games and have put themselves out of contention for first in the East. So for the Bulldogs and Frontenacs, that game gets underway at 7 o'clock. And the winner will then face whoever ends up finishing eighth in the Eastern Conference. So, definitely a must-watch game tonight between Brantford and Kingston to decide who will finish first and third in the Eastern Conference standings. Because remember, the division winners get automatically the first and second seed. The Barrie Colts, they won the Central Divisions. They automatically finished second. And because of their loss last night to the Owen Sound Attack, the Barrie Colts, no matter the outcome tomorrow night against the Niagara Ice Dogs, the Colts will finish second. They're just waiting to find out who will they face in the first round. It's right now coming down to the Sudbury Wolves or the Niagara Ice Dogs. And for Sudbury Niagara, they're separated by 3 points, which means the Ice Dogs, to move into the sixth seed, they have to win their last two games against North Bay tonight and Barrie tomorrow if the Ice Dogs are going to move into sixth. In all likelihood, I'm pretty sure we're looking at a Barrie Colts versus Niagara Ice Dogs first round matchup, and the Sudbury Wolves will finish sixth, and they will face whoever finishes third between Brantford and Kingston. And that leaves us with the Ottawa 67s trying to catch the North Bay Battalion at the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings. Still just 2 points separating those two teams. They're both in action. North Bay, of course, they're going to be in Niagara tonight, so they're in must-win territory. And the Ottawa 67s, they're going to be in Erie this evening before finishing their regular season with a trip to Brantford to face the Bulldogs, who are in a battle for first place. So if North Bay and Ottawa end up tied after the remaining two games on their schedule, they will play a one-game playoff, and North Bay will be the host because they have the tiebreaker scenario with the regulation overtime wins category. And wouldn't that be something if we could get a playoff like that? I think it's been since 2002 was the last time we had a one-game playoff to decide the eighth seed in either conference. And we could have two of those one-game playoffs potentially on Tuesday evening. So that's how things are looking in the Eastern Conference. And the one playoff matchup that has been decided already is the Oshawa Generals and Brampton Steelheads. Oshawa will finish fourth, Brampton will finish fifth, and that series will actually get underway on Friday, March 28th. So the Generals will have home ice advantage. So game one is on the Friday, and then game two Sunday evening at 6 o'clock. That's a traditional start time for the Generals on a Sunday, so they'll get to start the week off. Have not yet seen when games 3 and 4 will take place in Brampton. I'm sure we will get those details probably as soon as I post this video. I'm sure those details will be released. But we are looking at a Oshawa-Brampton matchup, which is going to be fascinating because at the start of the regular season, many picked Oshawa and Brampton to finish 1 and 2 in the Eastern Conference. And here they are meeting in the first round of the playoffs as Brampton dealing with injuries during the regular season. So kind of a disappointing end result to the regular season, but they've been one of the hottest teams in the second half. Was Oshawa, of course, they have the coaching change. They've now brought in another coach as an associate, and there's just trying to understand what direction the Generals are going in right now as they're trying to save their season. They got so much talent on this team. They've got that championship experience where they lost in the final last year to the London Knights. So this Generals team, they know what it takes to go on a run here in the East. So they might as well take on the big fish from Brampton in the first round. So that's how the Eastern Conference looks. In the West, we already know that the London Knights have locked up the first seed. Windsor has locked up the second. Kitchener has locked up the third. And then it came down to would Saginaw clinch the fourth seed, and they have in fact clinched it after the Erie Otters suffered a loss to the Guelph Storm. So there was an outside chance that Erie could catch the Spirit to take home ice advantage. It was a long shot, but it ended up being finalized last night. So we know that it will be Saginaw versus Erie in the first round of the playoffs in the Western Conference standings. They've already released the schedule for their matchup. It gets underway at the Dow Event Center on Thursday, March 27th, and that will be game one. Game two will then be on Saturday, March 29th. The series then shifts to Erie, and game three will be April 1st, so that's the Tuesday, and April 3rd will be game four. So we've already got the schedule released between Saginaw and Erie, and it's a fascinating series. You've got Michael Misa on one side and potentially Matthew Schaefer on the other, and those two players have been going back and forth, potentially being the first overall pick in the 2025 NHL entry draft, and potentially they could go head-to-head in the matchup. Remember, Schaefer broke his collarbone while playing for Team Canada at the World Junior Hockey Championships. Dave Brown, the general manager, has said the target was late March for a return, and they're still hopeful that Schaefer will be in the lineup for the Erie Otters once the playoffs get underway next week. Also, Carey Tarrant still out of the lineup since he suffered that injury in Owen Sound. Remember, he had to be taken to hospital as a result of a crash into the end boards. There's still no timeline for whether or not Tarrant will rejoin this team come playoff time. The team is optimistic that they could get Tarrant back, which would be a big boost. But right now, that's the situation for the Erie Otters. I think this is going to be a very fun series with the offensive capabilities of the Saginaw Spirit. But then don't count out Erie. Erliden has been outstanding between the pipes this season. There's been some low points, of course, for the Erie Otters. They've been through a lot this season with the controversy off the ice with Stan Butler. Remember that he was let go. Chris Millette then took over, and then the passing of Jim Waters, the owner. So there's been a lot going on with this franchise, and it'd be a great message if this team could go on a bit of a run here, as some pick Erie to be a team potentially to challenge in the Western Conference. I was one of those people who said I would expect Erie to be a good contender in the West, but we haven't yet seen that yet. There's been too many inconsistencies, and of course, injuries have kind of plagued this team. So I think this is going to be a fascinating series. I'm going to do actually a more in-depth playoff preview for each series once we know every matchup. Expect those videos to start being posted on Monday, so stay tuned for that. So outside of that, of course, the Flint Firebirds, they clinched a playoff spot last night because Sarnia lost in Windsor. So the Flint Firebirds, they're sitting sixth right now. There is a chance that the Sioux Greyhounds can pass them, although the Firebirds do have 3 games remaining this weekend. Tonight they're in Sarnia, and then they have a home and home at the Saginaw Spirit. So all they need really is just a win, and that would clinch sixth, and that would put them in a matchup with the Kitchener Rangers in the first round. So it looks like we could have Kitchener-Flint in the first. And then after that, of course, the battle for those final 2 playoff spots in the Western Conference continues. The Greyhounds right now, 58 points, and then it's Owen Sound with 57 after that big win on the road against Barrie last night. And then the Sarnia Sting on a 6-game losing streak. They're on the outside looking in, 2 points back of Owen Sound and 3 points back of the Sioux Greyhounds. And there's a big game on Sunday. So if Sarnia can pull out a win here tonight against the Flint Firebirds, then that game in Sault Ste. Marie between the Sting and the Greyhounds will be a marquee matchup to watch, as that could decide the final playoff positioning in the Western Conference. And like I said about North Bay, Ottawa, there is that possibility of a 1-game playoff. And if it's Owen Sound Sarnia, the Attack, they would have home ice advantage in a 1-game playoff. And could you imagine the atmosphere at the Bayshore if it is Owen Sound Sarnia for a 1-game playoff? It would be electric and unreal. But we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out, as junior hockey fans doing a lot of scoreboard watching. I know during the broadcast last night, Gene and I were doing scoreboard watching just to keep tabs on what's going on. It's a lot of excitement, and you have to think the Ontario Hockey League is thrilled with the way this season is wrapping up, with positioning still up for grabs, the drama in the conferences for those final playoff spots, and potentially 2 tiebreaker games on Tuesday. That would be unreal if that's what transpires. Now, I was tuning into the Mike Stubbs' podcast, as he does a chat weekly about the London Knights and the goings-on around the Ontario Hockey League. I definitely recommend it to tune into his podcast. But he was talking about realignment, and this conversation, it comes up periodically where you do look at the OHL divisions right now and how they're set up. It's kind of awkward, especially when you look at the East Division. Ever since the Belleville Bulls relocated to Hamilton to become the Bulldogs, The East has kind of been a little clunky because if you look at the map for the Bulldogs, they have to travel through the GTA to face their division rivals, with the Brampton Steelheads being in the GTA. And what Mike Stubbs was saying in his podcast is why not switch Brampton with either Owen Sound or Erie? And it is an interesting concept when you think about it, because Brantford less than an hour away from both the Guelph Storm and the Kitchener Rangers, and about an hour from the London Knights. So it'd fit in quite well geographically. But then, okay, so if you move the Erie Otters to the east and you put them in the central, then you've got the Otters playing in a division with Sudbury and North Bay. That's quite the hike, a lot farther than what they have to do when they face the Owen Sound attack. Or you move Owen Sound into the central, and yes, it would fit geographically, and I think the rivalry would be great between Barrie and Owen Sound. Imagine if those two teams met in the playoffs, but then you're losing those rivals for Owen Sound and Guelph and Kitchener. They've developed some good rivalries over the years, so it's not an easy fix, and I kind of wonder if the time for realignment has passed, because now that the OHL talking about potential expansion, I think that's how you solve some of the divisional imbalances right now in the Ontario Hockey League. Those, of course, expansion talks have kind of been put on hold at the moment with Youngstown and Muskegon, and it sounds as though the NHL talking with the Canadian Hockey League, trying to get them to tone down the expansion rhetoric as they want to get a new CBA figured out with, of course, the vote with the NCAA situation. So expansion sounds like it's on pause. However, you've got communities like Cornwall and Niagara Falls, New York now openly talking about potential expansion. And if you put a team in Cornwall, that would solve your East Division struggles, because east of the GTA, you only have four teams: Oshawa, Peterborough, Kingston, and Ottawa. So if you could get Cornwall in there, maybe Belleville, although Michael Anlauer has said he's committed to keeping the Belleville Senators in that city, after he purchased the Senators hockey team. So I don't think the Belleville Senators are going anywhere. It'll be a long-term plan, I think, to have Belleville back in the Ontario Hockey League, as much as we would love to see the Bulls return. I don't think that's likely at this point. What's most likely is if maybe they add Cornwall to the mix. So that was the discussion that Mike Stubbs was having on his podcast. But then after that, he expanded it further into the playoffs. And he said, why not get rid of the divisions, just have two conferences? So you can have an East and a West, and then have a kind of a balanced schedule, maybe even reduce it to 65 games. And then he had a whole formula. But the thing that really stood out to me as an idea is you would have your conference playoffs in the first round, and then the second round reseed. So then you have crossover playoff matchups. Because could you imagine if we would have a London Knights Kitchener Rangers OHL final, or how about a London Knights Windsor Spitfires OHL final? That would be unreal, especially with the season those three teams have had this year. I think the Ontario Hockey League would love it. The fans would love it. But still, it does come down to geography. It comes down to mileage, the hotels. So there's a lot to consider here. But at this point, I don't think divisional realignment will take place. But I think it's important for the OHL to maybe consider some alternatives to maybe the playoff format. But time will tell. We'll have to wait and see how it all works out. But I would, looking at the map, because I've got it here on the screen, just I know it says the Mississauga Steelheads. They're now the Brampton Steelheads. But looking at the map, it's really hard, I think, to really align up these divisions without breaking up rivalries, like key geographical rivalries. It'd be fantastic to have Barrie and Owen Sound together, but like I said earlier, separating Guelph and Kitchener from Owen Sound, or even if you broke up Kitchener and Guelph, how would the fans react to that? Because if you look at the map, you could have a central division with Sudbury, North Bay, Owen Sound, Barrie, and Guelph. Then your East Division could be Ottawa, Kingston, Peterborough, Oshawa, Brampton, and then a South Division of Erie, Niagara, Brantford, Kitchener, London. Those would all fit together. The travel might not be too bad, but still, that's where it's hard. It's like, can you really break up a rivalry like Kitchener and Guelph? It's really hard to do. And I know many have always said, why not put a division in the north? Have Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury together. Well, if you do that, a lot of people will then lump Owen Sound into that, and it doesn't work going around Georgian Bay. The Chi-Chi-Mon doesn't run during the winter, so those are going to be long bus rides. And when you look at the schedule right now, the OHL's already reconfigured it to help reduce travel, as Owen Sound and Sault Ste. Marie, yes, they're in the same conference, but they only play each other twice, and that's because of travel. So instead of going to Sault Ste. Marie twice, that's why they play the Barrie Colts 6 times during the regular season. And because of Owen Sound Barrie meeting 6 times, the Colts only play the Peterborough Petes twice. And I talked with Pete Dalladay, the play-by-play voice of the Peterborough Petes, and he said how he would love to see Barrie, Peterborough face each other more because they're in the same conference, which makes sense. But because we don't have a balanced schedule, that's where matchups and meetings are being taken away. For instance, there's also Niagara and Erie. They meet 6 times during the regular season because of geography. But because those two meet so much, Niagara and Oshawa, they only meet twice. And the trip, for those two teams, not really that far. And then also Ottawa, Kingston, they only go to Sudbury once. That's been a long-standing tradition because of the commute between those two cities and the city of Sudbury. So personally, I would like it if the league could find a way to have a balanced schedule so everything is even and try and keep the geography. I know this is easier said than done, but yeah, this is my thoughts on it, and I think expansion would help solve some of these problems. But we'll have to wait and see, when does expansion come and how will that expansion work. So I wanted to bring it up here on the channel after Mike Stubbs talked about it because I think it's fascinating. It's a discussion that many junior hockey fans like to dive into. So if you have thoughts on how you would shape the divisions with realignment or conferences, let me know in the comments section down below because it is fascinating to talk about. And I know the playoffs are around the corner too. So we've got a lot going on around the Ontario Hockey League. And do appreciate all the support and all the interactions. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll talk to you again soon.